This is Stash back with another hopefully interesting discussion going on to my the Qigong section of my YouTube channel, which I hope you guys are enjoying, or somebody is, or you're using it kind of like an ASMR thing to get some Z's. Just kidding, but or not. I mean, good. If you're getting some sleep from my talks, that's good too. Tonight I'm going to rant about 2001 Space Odyssey, Yogi and Taoist training, a master's, chi, energy, and DMT and space travel. Okay, so how does that all tie in? Alright, so I'll start from, I suppose, the most interesting point is that in the making of 2001 Space Odyssey, Stanley was, from everything I've read, all the YouTubes I've checked out, he was probably the most meticulous film director about detail and reality in his films. Although they're fiction, he strove to make them fantastically detailed and real as he could, is what I gathered. That is why he is seen by many as the best of the best in certain aspects of film making. So, in other words, when he made Doctor Strangelove, I don't know if you guys have heard that. The interior of the B-52, he made it so realistic that the Defense Department was alarmed by this. Although, if you go into those, did Stanley Kubrick fake the moon landing and all those kind of like speculative conspiratorial YouTubes, maybe they were in on it with him, so they showed him, but anyway, he constructed the interior of the B-52 so realistically that it shocked the military, as the story goes, as how I heard it. So, in probably his greatest film would be the 2001 Space Odyssey, and for me personally, that was made in 1968. Any space film that they've made since then, even with the souped up advanced technology that they have now, the presentation of 2001 is still in many ways the best. Except there's no Pan Am Airlines or whatever, and some of the clothing styles have gone by the wayside, and some of it, of course, is primitive to the CGI we have now, but much of it is so well shot that it psychs you out into thinking it's incredibly real, and it's just because of his collaboration with Arthur C. Clarke, who was arguably one of the best science fiction writers ever. It gives you that feel of complete reality and utter weirdness that we all loved. How does this connect to Taoism and yogi training? Taoism I know much more about, but I'll get into that. Well, it's because when Stanley Kubrick was researching it, he got into questioning all aspects, and one is quite astounding when you think about it. How would a human astronaut, travel? How would they deal with that? And so he studied it and he researched how and one of the things he came upon was NASA and so forth, the scientists was studying, how we're going to do this. One of the things he came upon was they would be, looking into utilizing drugs, powerful drugs, so that the astronaut could survive. And the name escapes me. I wrote this down, but he although they did something called the Marsh Chapel experiment. Students, I believe it was Boston University. They call it the Marsh Chapel because they gave them drugs, LSD, DMT, what have you. Sorry, I didn't have the specific drugs, but they received drugs. As Salvador Dali said, I don't do drugs, I am drugs. Same for me. Okay. So they needed to do every possible experiment for reducing the awareness of time, because they would be theoretically traveling incredibly long distances. So they said, how are we going to do? We're going to do hypnosis, hibernation, hypnotism, drugs, and of course drugs. So that Marsh Chapel one was to see if hallucinogenic drugs taken in a religious setting would indeed give somebody the feeling of comparable with the great the mystics of history. So the people who undertook the study said they described a feeling, going past the present and future into a and beyond space-time, into the infinite, beyond the three-dimensional world. That would come to pass in the film. When you recall the scene when astronaut Bowman, I remember Hal was like, I'm losing my mind, Dave. I'm losing my mind trying to do this YouTube for you guys and make it smooth. But this is interesting, right? Bowman, the scene when he's in the color tunnel there, he confronts the Sentinel. One of the main characters in 2001 Space Odyssey is the Sentinel. There's who is in the movie? There's really not that many characters, main characters. There's Hal, the two astronauts, Hal himself, the computer, and the apes, the warring apes. So he's in a spacecraft. He confronts the Sentinel, the mysterious Sentinel, and it's to the best of my knowledge, it's astronaut Dave is he's in a Stargate. So he moves past the realm of time and space. But we see that he's among the aliens. He confronts the aliens, the Stargate, the Sentinel, and what have you. And he goes through. He ages, and he. Forgive me, I've got the sequence wrong down, but I believe he becomes reborn. Gets very, very old. He's witnessing himself, and he makes contact in the year 2001. Drugs, hypnosis, hibernation. Now, you might be wondering what the hell I'm talking about in terms of 2000 Space Odyssey and Yogi Masters, Taoist Masters. That would be, and if you've checked out the book Tao of Physics, which is criticized by some physicists as being a little new agey, little too new agey. But that scientist who wrote that book, his name escapes me, but you know, he was like describing how high science meets the mystics, the Taoists, the yogis, or in his case, I guess he was talking to yoga masters, but you know, they are to me similar at the high levels. These swamis, yogis, Taoists, so forth, Buddhists, they reach through they reach through intense training, fasting, and meditation, the higher level. They reach the higher level. The greatest religious figures are reported to be highly involved, more than anyone, in fasting and meditation activity. So, what do they experience in that? They go beyond. They can travel within in the past, into the future, into the now. As that feeling under the drugs that the study that Stanley Kubrick was interested in, and that the NASA would be too, because how they were looking into it, because how would theoretically the astronauts be able to travel these tremendous distances? How would their minds survive? How would their sanity survive? How would their body survive? As it turns out, you see them, they're in those sleeping pods. So they chose the hibernation route for that film. And I think that's not the first time. I think the Event Horizon, which was a great, if you've enjoyed 2001, you happen to miss that. That's a horror film, but it's very good. And that they deal with the tremendous distance with the hibernation technique too. My point with the hibernation, the Taoist masters are credited with that method. They are said to go to the caves. They're masters of hibernation. There's stories that I believe are true, that many of these men, I think, I'm not aware of any female Taoist masters that have had this longevity. I know that there are high masters of female martial arts, just like men, but I off the top of my head, to be honest, I haven't heard of the hibernating. I've just only heard the Taoist guys with the beards and so forth. Hit me up in the liner notes if you know some female Taoists. I think there is some actually that are credited with that. Way off topic. I didn't want to make this a male-female thing. Honestly, there's some tremendous female martial artists, and Yogani. I think you pronounce it Yogani for the female. In fact, I'm going way off topic now. I remember being told a story about an incredible high-level man in Korea in terms of chi. I believe his name is Jun, and he has made the headlines in more recent newspapers. And this man, had gone through experiments, sending his chi across a river, and guys reporting their eyes, feeling it, getting affected, getting hit with his chi power. And he trained with a Buddhist nun or a Taoist, Buddhist nun, I think he said. Anyway, a nun. She's the one who told him what he would call breathing. Breathing. All these techniques are breathing. These tremendous feats that, of course, Western scientists would say is all nonsense, but I believe that some of it is true, and some of it's a mix of nonsense, and some of its gurus are real, masters are real, and some of them are charlatans. and levels of in between and mixes in between. This knowledge that's conveyed is sometimes with the martial arts secrets is always a secret, and it's some families just keep it within them, and some is hidden. Some are cults. It's on and on. This spectrum is incredible, and you might say, yeah, university professors are the same way. But astronaut Dave Bowman in the incredible 2001 achieved this space travel with scientific power in his ship, and then presumably another higher, much sophisticated society decided to give him a trip beyond the infinite through the Stargate. Now, that the color pattern in that is curious that they selected that, because I think, and Joe Rogan and other dudes who know about DMT and the spirit molecule, I haven't taken it myself, but I think they report something like that, a Mandela pattern, or colors. He has reported, I know Joe Rogan reported seeing, gestures and stuff, which I think are otherwise referred to as machine elves and things like that. But certainly the colors patterns, I've seen some awash with color. I've experienced some dreams with color in training with Qigong myself. That type of thing is reported by people doing the powerful drugs. And the traditions of the shamans in South American culture, and I believe in African culture with the voodoo. All talk about spirit travel and report, from their cultural point of view, some very mind-blowing stuff, which is cool. Some of the knowledge that we're talking about here is again, it's very hidden. It's metaphysical. It's a kind of a lost ability, really. We see shadows of it in training manuals that come to the United States, Great Britain, what have you. But it's not typically in the Western mindset. That's why you meet many people. It's funny, you meet people from Asia that come to live in the United States after they don't believe in Qi, which is really nothing but energy. Again, there's the I've said this before, there's the 5 senses. The 6th would be Qi, right? That is evident in when you experience it. I can remember I can't on camera show the first time I experienced it, but the second, I'll give you the second time, is with the sword finger that a teacher of mine had taught me, the best teacher I had. Counterclockwise movement, and then like a sword finger. And I remember that this is the second time. So that would be a Qigong movement that you might do. And there are thousands. There's a lot of styles of Qigong, probably as many as external martial arts. For those of you who don't know, you can break it down, but there's hard style martial arts and internal. The hard would be like your weightlifting, your karate. Basically, if you're wearing a belt, The internal never would wear a belt. The chi is flowing. In theory, there's a limit to how strong you can get from weightlifting and external hard martial arts. In theory, there's no limit to the level you can attain with the internal martial arts, which is interesting. And as you get older, you should start to gradually switch. Makes the most sense. So I wish I could have did this more without looking at my notes here, because it would have made this impromptu lecture seem more interesting. But I found that interesting. I'll leave in the line of notes that book that I was reading about Stanley Kubrick, Stan the Man. But you can see where in constructing that scene with the Stargate and Dave Bowman, the research that he did was looks like it was some accounts from the people that experimented with the sophisticated drugs. Off the top of my head, I think they dropped LSD. A lot of studies were done more in the 60s, I think, and of course there's the famous one connected to the MK Ultra of a Mr. Olson in the Central Intelligence Agency, the guy who either was pushed out the window or he had a bad trip and he jumped because he was studying LSD on behalf of the agency. Probably you guys well know that story. Now, Stephen Hawking just passed away. Not all that long ago. This is interesting also, and from the point of view of a real quantum physicist, I think it would be technically call him, but Stephen Hawking, most famous guys since Einstein, I suppose, in some ways. He addressed the fact of how 2001 and so forth, in confronting the entities, the beings, aliens, what have you. Why hasn't it been done, and how could it be done? He brought up the point that to go find this light, even if you could achieve light speed travel and use genetic engineering on your astronaut people and so forth, just the amount of time that it would take to even get to the center of our own galaxy would be, he was saying, 50,000 years. So you would need a lot of DMT. They portrayed it in the Event Horizon that they would cheat by the ship. Oh, it escapes me how they fold space. It explains it. I don't know. Dr. Weir explained it. I don't know. That escapes me. But that was interesting. And the interesting part about that is that the ship, it's traveling through to another dimension and winds up in hell. So that's why it's a horror movie. It reaches into hell. Which, here's where religion and science might meet in some aspects as well. That the masters are said to be able to go into the body, inner space, and then travel out of space. There's no limit to the chi energy, the speed of chi. Is it as fast as light? We don't quite know. Does it take some time? I've been taught that people who gather up a tremendous amount of the energy can send it out, and send a message, and people who they haven't heard from receive it via dream or other means, and then they make contact. And I'm gonna do another YouTube about that. I'm gonna YouTube that up. I hope this rambling is interesting, but so that's interesting too. But Hawking said that that tremendous distance would have to be, that's a little bit of a bummer in other ways. Oh, we're never going to meet the visitors because it's too damn far. That's just our own universe. And now people like Dr. Michio Kaku and others are saying that we exist in many dimensions. I've heard the 11 dimensions, or multiverses. They're talking about this type of thing now, where we exist in many other forms. And we've heard this many times, both not just in science fiction, but now they're talking about it in science. Same holds true for the legends, the stories that the Taoist masters, masters of breathing, travel, and they can shift dimensions. Have I done some of this? I will share some of my experiences myself. I also hope to be doing soon a very well thought out hypnosis session if you guys want to join me. Where I'm going to try to see what we can do to bridge some of the space-time problem. So perhaps you can join me. So tell me what you think in the liner notes. Tell me if this was interesting at all. Crammed a lot in here. Admittedly, vlogged this a little bit sloppy, but this is some interesting stuff. Tell me your experiences with your yoga teachers, your yogis, your yoganis. That's the female name, yoganis. Have you had a Taoist master training? That's my path, has been Taoism. Have you had any luck with it? Have you had some gurus and teachers that weren't so good? Let me know, my friends. Love that scene. Astronaut Dave Bowman, he survived. He defeated Hal, but then the Sentinel came to pay him a visit. Sorry, I got that scene screwed. It's as if he reached tremendous old age, but he goes in a loop, and I believe he becomes a little baby, an embryo, and he goes along. I'm not ashamed to admit that that's a complex scene in cinema. Again, 2001 Space Odyssey, the Taoist Masters. Let me know what you think, Rambo. In the liner notes. Give me some feedback. Alright. Take care. God bless yous. More interesting vlogs from Stosh soon, I hope. Ciao.